Hey, look, it's the TheDinoCollector! Yay! Hey everyone, Nate for the TheDinoCollector, and yes, I know you guys are looking for the Angriest 1955 special color video. That's coming out soon. I'm almost done editing it, but for now, in the meanwhile, let's just take a look at some old games. Now, for those of you who don't know, on my YouTube page, when you check my description, you know, I like talking about, you know, like Godzilla figures and stuff like that, but I also like talking about old games. Like, I'm the guy who made that Dreamcast short, you know, like this one. Yeah, that one. So, why not make a new video about... Oh dear. About the PlayStation 3. Yup, as you can see, this thing is absolutely massive. I have to move my camera all the way back so I can show you the entire console. This thing is huge. We're not going to be talking about the entire PS3 itself. That's going to be for a later time. We're going to be talking about its controller. Now, I know a lot of people talk about this controller mainly because of, you know, the 6-axis function and everything. But before we talk about that, I just want to talk about its similarities to its predecessor, the PlayStation 2 controller. You know, these two controllers are basically the exact same, only with a few minor differences. Notably, the lack of a wire on this controller, obviously, because this is like the first PlayStation controller to have a normal wireless controller. Of course, just, you know, mini USB, but still, it's better than, you know, like a clunky, long wire just being plugged in. But yeah, I do like this controller a lot. There are some other differences also, like, you know, like this PlayStation button right here. It's replacing the analog button, which was here on the PS2, as well as on the original PS1 DualShock controller and the dual analog controller, which is basically this controller with concave analog sticks and no rumble. Sony did a couple other tweaks, especially with the designs on the controller. Like, you know, the PS2 controller had this little PlayStation symbol on here. It's a PlayStation, and above it says Sony. This one doesn't show that at all. It just says Sony, which I understand why they did that, because they have, you know, like the PlayStation button over here. But like, you could have put like the word PlayStation underneath it. That would have made it look a little bit nicer, because this feels kind of empty to me. Also, I feel like they've used this controller way too much, because they use it since 1994, and they've just been putting brand new mechanics into it, which, to me, it feels great, but at the same time, I feel like they kind of needed to make a new controller, which you know, they kind of did with the, controller they showed off in their convention, which... No, I kind of actually want to use the controller again. Yes, the original controller wasn't even this. It was just a boomerang controller, which did not look good at all, which, honestly... I'm kind of happy that they brought this design back, honestly. Other new difference. These triggers. On the original PlayStation 2, they were just simple, you know, buttons. They were just like clicky. On the new one, they are analog, so you can actually push them and stuff like that, which I don't really like it, because, like I said earlier, they use the exact same design. And let's just show off the PS4 controller, for example. Let me show you. You see, like, this controller, it has the exact same analog triggers, but they have this little end to it, which makes it a lot easier to push and stuff. On the DualShock 3/6 axis, it's still kind of rounding off over here, which makes it very uncomfortable, because you can accidentally lose your grip and you can slip off, which I don't like that. That's why I never like the triggers on this thing. But the shoulder buttons, they're the exact same as the PS2, albeit I feel like they're a lot less. I don't know. Last minor difference is the quality of the plastic on this thing. Listen to this. Yeah, that's not the controller being old or anything. This controller has been infamous for having very, very creaky plastic. And no, this is not just on the controller, because the PS3 itself has that exact same issue. Just listen to this. Yeah, it has that issue. I don't know why Sony made the quality of the plastic super flimsy, because the PS2 controller, listen to this, it doesn't have that. And this thing's like, what, like 6 years older, 6, 7 years older than this, and it doesn't even have this issue. So I don't understand why Sony made it super creaky for some reason. And that's pretty much it with the minor differences between the PS2 and PS3 controllers. Now let's move on to everything new on this controller. First thing I want to talk about is the 6-axis controller. I know everyone's talked about this controller for having the 6-axis, which I know a lot of people didn't like at launch. The only reason why the 6-axis really existed was because Sony was in a lawsuit with a company known as Immersion, which sued them over the Rumble technology, which is why they never brought the Rumble to the PS3 controller at launch, which made it really awkward because in order to play the games you have to like press buttons and then like you have to like move it. If you don't move it, then you can't play your game properly, which is very clunky. Believe me, it is really clunky. Games like Uncharted, they work really well with it because they don't really use it a lot, but games like the launch titles like these, they don't really work that well because they require the movement, which when you play it you have to be like, oh, move it here, move it here. It just feels a bit off to me. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. Lastly, I want to talk about the grips. These grips are way too short for me because I have to hold it like this and it does not feel good at all. I wish they went with the PS4 route and made it longer. I don't know why, it just feels a bit weird to me. I know a lot of people don't really like these short grips. I know a lot of people like the PS4 ones, which I agree on that. And lastly, I want to talk about one last thing. The analog sticks. Sony. Microsoft released the Xbox 360 with their analog sticks being concave. This one is convex, which, again, is exactly the same as the PS2 controller, which literally just shows that they did not do any changes to the design, which, I get it, this is like iconic controller design for PlayStation, but like, you could just tweak it to have, like, the dual analog controller from the PS1 that I mentioned earlier had concave grips, but then they changed it back to this, which I don't understand why. I don't really like that because every time you play your games, you feel like your hands are just gonna slip off the analog stick, and that won't be fun. Especially with like modern games like Metal Gear Solid 4 or any of like the PS3 like system design games. They just don't feel good. But games like PS1 games, PS2 games, they work fine because you can use the D-pad, and the D-pad, I will say, I actually do like the PlayStation D-pad. That is something I don't want them to change, just the analog sticks. And thankfully, they fixed that with the PS4 controller, which is a massive step up in terms of everything on it. I do like how they kept this, but we're not talking about the PS4 controller. We'll talk about that later. The last thing I want to talk about is the Start and Select. This is the last Sony home console that actually utilizes it, because the next couple years later, they use the options button, which I don't know why they use options, because it does not sound as well as Start, but that's Sony's thing. I don't know why they did that. And that is pretty much it about the PS3 controller. Overall, it's a good controller. I love how they kept the original design, although I feel like they could have tweaked it a little bit, like, again, concave analog sticks, fix the triggers, and longer grips. But other than that, everything else is great about this controller. If you have a PS3, please use this. This is a great controller. And yeah, 6-axis is okay. If you have the launch titles, then they're not super good, but if you have Uncharted or whatever, they feel great on this controller. And yeah, that's pretty much it. See ya.